4. I am not scared, Martha told herself. I am not scared. I am not scared. You're scared, aren't you? Said the doctor. No, she said too loudly and too quickly. Yes, you are. And shall I tell you why you are? Is it because fear is a sign of intelligence? She said hopefully. He wrinkled his nose in apology. Oh, I wish I could say yes. But no, that's not it. The reason you're scared is because I was wrong. Wrong? She said. You? He held up his hands. Yeah, I know, hard to believe, genius and all that. Though, when I say wrong, perhaps I'm being a bit melodramatic. It might be more accurate to say I can see more of the big picture now. Are we talking about jigsaws again? She asked. Kind of, I suppose. Remember when you asked if the mist was toxic, and I said it wasn't? Martha didn't like where this was leading. They were currently walking through the mist. They were surrounded by it, wreathed in it. Yes, she said guardedly. Well, that's the bit I was wrong about. You mean to say it is toxic? She put out a hand and grabbed the sleeve of his long coat. Oh, suddenly I don't feel so well. I'm sure there's a burning sensation at the back of my throat. That's indicative of... Oh, yeah, the doctor butted in cheerfully, swirling a hand in the green mist. Poison, this stuff is. Only it doesn't affect your body. Doesn't it? No. He tapped the side of his temple with a long forefinger. It affects your mind. Works its nasty way down all those primitive little channels to all those dank little rooms where we keep our phobias and fears. And then it throws open the doors and lets them all out. There's the storming of the Bastille going on in that noggin of yours, Martha Jones. Though to be fair, he conceded wistfully, the storming of the Bastille wasn't as impressive as the French would have us believe. It wasn't actually much of a storming, more of a kind of light drizzle. I think I feel a bit better now, said Martha. He gave an exaggerated wink. That's my girl. Still quite scared, though, she said. Yeah, well, that's okay, he replied. Fear is a sign of intelligence. They were retracing Earl Clayton's steps in an attempt to discover what had happened to him. Despite her brusqueness, Eloise Walsh had taken the old man under her scrawny wing. She had told the doctor and Martha that Earl lived in the big house at the end of Harrow's Lane, and that he always followed the same route home after a night's drinking. The doctor and Martha had been following her directions for over 10 minutes, but so far all was quiet. In fact, they hadn't come across a single soul since leaving the hotel. Martha thought that the good people of Blackwood Falls obviously had more sense than to venture out in a pea souper like this. Have you come across many mouth-removing aliens before? She asked, hoping a chat would allay her nervousness. Not many, no, said the doctor. Came across one not long ago that took whole faces. Maybe this is that one's little brother or something? Nah, the methodology's completely different. Will Mr. Clayton recover, do you think? He will if I have anything to do with it, said the doctor grimly. What if that thing does to us what it did to him? She asked. Ha! I'd like to see it try and shut me up. They were passing a pair of tall, black, wrought iron gates. In the murk beyond, Martha could see a thread of path weaving between flanking expanses of grass, from which loomed the vague suggestions of gravestones. The doctor stopped. I see a light. Actually or metaphorically? Asked Martha. He pointed through the bars of the gate. In there. I can't see anything, she said. It's gone now, but it was there. Come on, let's have a look. The gate creaked as they pulled it open. Well, said Martha, that was inevitable. The doctor grinned at her and strolled casually ahead, Sonic at the ready. The green mist swirled around them. Martha kept seeing shapes in it, which she informed herself firmly were all in her mind. Soon the black gates were no longer visible, and she couldn't help thinking that it was as though they had been denied their only escape route. Suddenly, in the gloom to her right, she saw a yellowish blur. "Was that—" she began, but the doctor was already striding off through the grass between the gravestones. "Obviously it was," she muttered. The mist was like an endless series of green curtains, parting to allow them access, then closing again behind them. As they neared the place where the yellowish blur had come from, they saw it a second time, and then a third, an eerie and mysterious wraith-like glow, which gradually resolved itself into something thankfully more mundane, a cone of mist-diffused light cast by a bobbing torch. Seconds later, they saw the vague outline of the person holding the torch. It was an old lady with straggly white hair, a long black skirt, and a grey shawl like a dense swathe of cobwebs. There was a black cat prowling at her heels, and Martha's heart skipped a beat. Not witches again, she thought. She'd had enough witches to last her a lifetime. The old lady had her back to them and was leaning over, looking down at something. The doctor walked right up beside her and leaned over too. "That's interesting," he said conversationally. He was peering into what looked to Martha like a rabbit burrow, quite narrow, but so deep that she couldn't see the bottom, even though the old lady was shining her torch into it. The old lady turned to look at the doctor, and Martha was relieved to see that her profile was not witchy at all. She was plump and bespectacled, with a perfectly normal nose and chin. "Who are you?" she asked, as if the doctor was intruding on her property. "Is that really the most pertinent question you should be asking right now?" he said blandly. She looked taken aback, but recovered quickly. Eyes flashing, she said, "What are you doing here?" "That's the one," he said, and for a moment Martha thought he was going to slap the old lady on the back. Then his voice became sombre. "We're investigating." "Investigating what?" "We're trying to find out who attacked Earl Clayton," said Martha. The old lady looked over her shoulder and fixed Martha with a fierce stare. "Earl's been attacked? How is he?" "He'll live," muttered the doctor. "So what are you doing here?" Martha asked, and tried not to look too pleased at the doctor's expression of approval. The old lady's eyes narrowed. She glanced at the doctor. "Who's she? Your floozy?" The doctor looked at Martha, his face adopting an expression of wide-eyed innocence. In an equally innocent voice he asked, "Are you my floozy, Martha?" "I'm nobody's floozy," Martha said, bridling. "She says she's nobody's floozy," the doctor said. The old lady humphed as if she didn't believe a word of it. "And she did ask a very good question," the doctor continued. "What are you doing here?" The old lady seemed to puff herself up. Almost defiantly she said, "I was drawn here. I felt that something was wrong." The doctor's expression hadn't changed, but Martha could almost hear the cogs whirring in his head. "Really?" he said. "Now, that's even more interesting." Although Martha hadn't seen him do it, the doctor had put his sonic screwdriver away when they had encountered the old lady. Now he whipped it out again and examined the hole with it. The old lady watched him for a moment and then asked, "What's that?" "It's an alien device," said the doctor casually, though Martha could see that he was watching her reaction out of the corner of his eye. She was silent for a moment, then she sniffed. "You from outer space, then?" He shrugged. "Could be." She turned to Martha. "Are you from outer space too?" "No," said Martha. "I'm from London." All at once the sonic began to emit a high-pitched warbling shriek. The black cat yowled and ran away. "Uh-oh," said the doctor quietly. "What?" said Martha. "They know we're here." "Who do?" asked the old lady. "Whoever dug this hole." He turned the sonic off, jumped to his feet and spun around. This time Martha's eyes were not playing tricks on her. Something odd was happening. Several mini whirlwinds had sprung up among the mist-shrouded tombstones. They were ranging about like spinning tops, gathering up autumn leaves which were strewn about on the ground. Within seconds, the whirlwinds had not only collected every leaf in the immediate vicinity, but had started to mould them into half a dozen roughly humanoid shapes, with thick, stubby limbs and vaguely spherical heads. Martha watched in horrified fascination as, with an eerie crackling of dry leaves, the closest of the whirlwind figures raised one of its lumpen hands and pointed at her. Next moment, she was aware of something spinning towards her face. She ducked instinctively, and the spinning object, a leaf, she realised in amazement, whipped past, though not before the tip of it had grazed her cheekbone and opened a thin, stinging cut. "Cover your heads!" shouted the doctor, turning up the collar of his coat as the leaf creatures ambled towards them with a dry, scraping sound. Martha pulled her jacket up over her black hair as all 6 of the creatures raised their arms and unleashed a flurry of razor-sharp leaves. She was half aware of the old lady beside the doctor flipping her grey shawl over her head, and then all 3 of them were running across the grass, taking care not to collide with the tombstones, which seemed to be rising out of the green mist in front of them like obstacles conjured by their pursuers. Martha felt several leaves slice across the skin of her hands as she ran, leaving stripes of blood in their wake. Fleeing for the gates, leaves slashing and swooping around them, she was half aware of the doctor frantically searching his pockets. Suddenly he shouted, "Aha!" and held aloft a packet of crisps. "All this exercise making you a bit peckish, is it?" she yelled. His long legs still carrying him unerringly through the obstacle course of gravestones, the doctor tore open the bag and started rooting through it, tossing crisps left and right with wild abandon. Finally he found what he was looking for, a little blue sachet of salt. Stuffing the empty bag back into his pocket, he tore open the sachet with his teeth and emptied the salt into his cupped hand. He muttered something, then flung the salt over his shoulder. Instantly, the storm of murderous leaves swirling around them fluttered harmlessly to the ground. Martha glanced back just in time to see the leaf creatures collapse into half a dozen lifeless mounds. The doctor had turned and was running back towards the nearest of the mounds. As Martha thumped to a halt, panting, he thrust his sonic into it. "Nothing," he said. "Just leaves." He scattered them with a kick. Martha bent at the waist, hands on knees, gasping with adrenaline. She was impressed to see that not only had the old lady managed to keep up with them, but she was barely out of breath. "What did you do?" Martha asked the doctor. "I chucked some salt at them," he said. "Yeah, I could see that, but why?" The doctor looked at the old lady and raised his eyebrows as if inviting her to answer. "Natural occult defence," she said, as if it was obvious. "Very good," he said, giving her one of his goofy grins. "You know your stuff. What did you say your name was again?" "I didn't," she said waspishly, and then abruptly her expression softened. "But it's Etta. Etta Helligan." "Pleased to meet you, Etta Helligan," said the doctor, shaking her hand. "I'm the doctor, and this is Martha." "You said occult," pointed out Martha. "Like magic, you mean?" "Or a science so ancient and arcane it seems like magic," he said. Martha remembered her initial thought when she had seen the old woman. "Is it the Carrionites again?" The doctor shook his head. "No, this isn't their style. Too elaborate, too theatrical." "And you're saying Shakespeare wasn't theatrical?" Martha said. Another grin. "Good point, well made." Etta Helligan watched this exchange with interest. "Why are you people here?" she asked. The doctor tossed his sonic into the air, caught it, and slipped it into his pocket. "We're here to help," he said. "Intergalactic Emergency Services, that's us," commented Martha dryly. The doctor suddenly leaned forward, peering intently into Etta's face. "You're old, aren't you?" he said. He turned, wincing indignantly as Martha punched him sharply in the back. Then his face cleared. Was that rude? He swung back to Etta. I'm sorry, that was rude, wasn't it? What I meant was, you've probably lived here a long time. You know a lot about the town. About its history. My great-great-great-grandparents were one of the founding families, she told him proudly. Well, great, he said. Let's go back to yours then for a chat, and preferably some cocoa. You're a very forward young man, aren't you? She said. Forward, backwards, sideways. Half the time I don't know whether I'm coming or going. Etta raised an eyebrow and turned to Martha. Is he always like this? No, said Martha. Sometimes he can be quite eccentric. Etta laughed, and suddenly Martha could see the young woman she had once been. Is that so? Then your life must be very interesting, Martha. Oh, yeah, said Martha, smiling back at her. It's certainly that.